Hi, I wanted to start a new series on my channel, and please take the word series very loosely because you guys know I'm still trying to figure out how to post consistently on YouTube. But I wanted to have like some sort of a series where I talk about new releases that have tempted me and show you what I'm using instead, because I wanted to get back into the original reason why I got into single eyeshadows in the first place, which is to give me the power to dupe and create every single color story possible, so that this way I wouldn't feel so tempted to buy new palettes. You know, back in 2020, I was really into eyeshadow palettes. Not that I'm not now, but I realized that I had to find a solution because I couldn't possibly buy every single palette I wanted, you know, not only in terms of money, but also in terms of storage, and also, you know, in terms of overwhelmment, you know, like the more stuff I have, the more overwhelmed I am. It's this constant struggle between wanting to have it all, but also suffering from having so much. So yeah, back in 2020, I thought, well, if I have a comprehensive single eyeshadow collection, I will be able to create every single color story possible, and therefore I will never need to buy, like, not that I needed to buy eyeshadow palettes, but this way I can counter this desire to buy every single new eyeshadow palette, because I can just dupe it and, you know, make my own version of it with what I already have. So this is kind of what this video and this new series is going to be about. I'm going to talk about certain palettes. I think I'm only going to talk about eyeshadow. Maybe there's something else that isn't eyeshadow tempts me and I feel like it's worth to talk about it, I will. But for this video specifically, it's only going to be eyeshadow. And I have a mix here of custom palettes that I made and palettes that I already have that have a very similar color story to a new palette being released. So let's start with the bottom here. So the first palette that I have here is the Glaminatrix Ice Cream Dream palette. It is an older palette. I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with the color story. I'm trying to see if I can fit it all. And this palette is what I am using instead of buying the new Cosmic Brushes palette. The Cosmic Brushes palettes have always been very intriguing to me because I find their color stories to be really, really beautiful. But because of the way that they are arranged, that kind of throws me off a bit because I'm an organized person and I like to have everything organized. Like not that this palette is organized, it's not. But all of the Cosmic Brushes palettes have something in it that I feel like I could just rearrange. And it's also easier for me to resist buying from new brands than it is to resist buying from brands that I already know and love the formula. So, you know, especially because I know that once I start buying from Cosmic Brushes, I will get into a rabbit hole where I will always want to buy from them if I like the formula, right? So that one, like, it was not like a super tempting palette, but I was definitely intrigued by that color story because I love pastels. So I pulled this palette out, and I have seen people doing comparison swatches, and they're not like 100% dupes, but they are very similar. They have the same vibe, where you have these like more brighter, not necessarily pastel shades at the top, not at the top, like you have a mix of pastels and these more like brighter shades. And the pastels in here are also very similar to the pastels in the Cosmic Brushes palette. And the thing is, I pulled this palette out to use it, you know, and fulfill that curiosity that I had for the Cosmic Brushes palette. And the more I use this palette, the more I realize that I don't like it. I feel that Glaminatrix has had at least 3 different formulas in their whole journey as a makeup brand. They probably had more, but this is how in my brain I see them. They have like their original formula, which the shimmers weren't like amazing. They were not super sparkly, they were more metallic. And that's like the formula on the Cake palette. I believe only one shade on the Cake palette is a sparkly. The other shimmers are more metallic. I think their matte formula has consistently been good, and as the years have, you know, passed, they have gotten better and better. You know, I really have no complaints about their matte formula. They are really, it's like a really amazing matte formula. But I do feel that their shimmers have come a long way. I find that the shimmers on their newer palettes tend to be overall more sparkly. You know, maybe they have like one or two that isn't sparkly, but the majority of them are sparkly shimmers. And on this palette here, I feel like this was like an in-between formula where you do have some sparkly shades. Like this shade here called Salted Caramel is a sparkly, Cookie Dough is a sparkly, French Vanilla is a sparkly, Pecan Praline. Look, this palette's upside down so I can't read. And this green one here. But the other ones are like this one here, it's really like a dud. And these here, like the pastel ones, they are more metallic than sparkly. So I just find myself frustrated when I use this palette because it doesn't give me the dream that I want. And truly, when I open this palette, what I want to use, I would say, are the pastel mattes. More specifically, this quad here. I love this quad. I like the pinks, I like the yellow and these ones, but truly what I love about this palette is this quad here. So yeah, I mean, I feel like whenever I open this palette, this is just what I want to use. So I end up like doing kind of the same thing, you know. For such a big palette, I end up not getting the use that I should get out of it. And it is definitely one that I remember when it came out, I wanted it so bad. And now looking back, like now having it and using it, I see that it's really not a special palette. Like, yes, these pastels here are amazing, but you shouldn't buy a palette this size to use like less than a third of it, a quarter of it maybe. So yeah, this is not like a full-on regret palette because I know that if I hadn't gotten it at the time, I would still be like wanting it. But I just like to remind myself of these things, that most of the time once I have something in my hands, it's most often than not everything I wanted it to be, especially with eyeshadow palettes. Single eyeshadow is different, but especially with eyeshadow palettes. Okay, the other palette that was tempting me was the new Lunar Beauty neutral palette. I don't know what it's called, but it was tempting me because the color story was right up my alley, but also because I already love Lunar Beauty's formula. I love their mattes, I love their shimmers, especially the formula that they have on that other like neutral pinky palette. I don't know what it is called, but it's like a neutral pink palette. I love that palette. Love the, like, it's not very like, it's not gonna give you like a lot of options, but every look I do with it just ends up being so beautiful. But then people were saying like, oh, that new palette from Lunar Beauty really looks like the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette, and it really does. It's a neutral, like these pinky neutrals with a pop of green and a pop of purple, like it does, right? And I love this palette. This was given to me by my friend Teresa on Instagram. If you don't follow her, I highly suggest you check her out. And this is the only product that I have from Glaminatrix Cosmetics. I don't have anything else from them. But this is impeccable. The mattes are amazing. The shimmers are amazing. It is magnetic. Like I have absolutely nothing to complain about it. So instead of buying the Lunar Beauty palette, I should just get more use out of what you know I already have and love. Okay, now we're gonna get into the custom palettes that I made. And this is probably the palette that has tempted me the most, and honestly, it's still tempting me. It's the Shroud Cosmetics Peaches and Dreams. Oh, this is not it. Wait, where is it? Wait a second. This is what happens when you have too much makeup. Anyway, this is it. This is my dupe of it. And I've been wanting to try Shroud Cosmetics for a while. Like they're all matte pastel palettes have been on my, like, I have my eye on them for a really long time, and they're also magnetic, which makes it quite, you know, quite perfect for me. So when I saw that they released this palette, which I love the color story, but most importantly, it seems to be a new shimmer formula that is like more sheer, more sparkly, you know, because the other shimmers that I've seen like on their other palettes, it's more like a thick metallic regular shimmer formula. So I'm still tempted to pick this one up, I have to be honest, because I really want to try the shimmer formula. And it looks like the shades are more unique than I thought they would be, but I don't know. I'm not picking it up right now. And this is my dupe of it, and I honestly am really happy with my dupe. I think that I did change some of the tones a little bit. I think these two shades here, they are a little more similar on the palette than on my dupe. And the tone of the green is different. The tone of the blue and the green shimmer are also slightly different. I think that this purple and this pink and the blue are probably like, and the purple are like the closest that I got. But yeah, I really love my dupe. And usually if I love my dupe, it can go either way, you know. It can either reassure me that I want the palette, or I'm just really happy with my dupe. The main reason that is like holding me back is that I really struggle combining these colors together. Like, I just want to pair the purple matte with the purple shimmer, you know, this orange with the pink, the blue with the blue. Like, I'm really not creative when it comes to combining colors. But there's something really pleasant, I don't know how to say, like, it's like visually pleasant about the layout that they did. And since, you know, I could maybe rearrange them, those are all the, you know, the tempting things. But I'm always looking for a reason not to buy something. So I'm considering that the color story being very colorful and slightly chaotic, but in a good way, is what is keeping me from buying it. So the first shade is Copacetic No Thoughts Just Bug. Second shade is Glam Shop Dvalika. Then we have Terra Moon's Sun Gray, Copacetic Cosmetics Hero of Time, Copacetic Trusty Mittens, Looksy Painted Lady, Copacetic Undead, Copacetic Lemon Water, Copacetic Lupine, and Terra Moon's Aphelion. The other palette that came out recently, and that one has tempted me, but again, as I said, I'm always looking for a reason not to buy, and this palette has like a pretty big deal breaker for me, is the new Glaminatrix Cosmetics palette. As I was saying before, I love their formula, I love that they're magnetic, but the new palette, which is called Sugar and Spice, the pan sizes are smaller. I think they're 22.5 millimeters. So that's a pretty big deal breaker for me, which is good because then it saves me some money. I did my dupe, and as I was looking at swatches to build my dupe, I realized that I don't think I like the palette, but the palette is truly not what I thought it was when I just saw the shades on the palette. Like, I hadn't, like, for me, when I first look at it, I had the feeling that the top two rows were like neutral, and then the bottom had this pops of pastels. But actually, a lot of the top row, like like these three shades here, are green. At least from the swatches that I have seen, they look pretty green. So yeah, I don't know. There's something about that like once I realized that, it kind of like threw me off. Not that I don't think it's a beautiful palette, but I just feel that in the end it's quite different from what I was seeing at first when it was like the first time that they showed the inside of the palette. Like, it just felt a lot more neutral with the pop of pastel, rather than like a green palette with pops of pastel. So I don't know how I feel about it. I'm gonna use this because I do like how it looks all together, but it's just definitely different from what I was expecting. And this happens to me a lot. Like, I see a color story on the palette, and once I have my hands on it, either on the real thing or on my version of it, I'm like, oh, wait a second, this is not what I was thinking. This happened to me with the Glamlight Barbie palette. I loved it on the, you know, like on the photos, and then when I got it and I like had to use it, I was like, oh, wait a second, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I pretty much just used like 2 shades of that giant Barbie palette. But yeah, this one is like not so confusing to me. It's just, but it's I don't know. It's just different from what I thought it would be. But I'm happy with my dupe, you know, especially with like the shimmers. The first one is Copacetic Pool Party. Second one, Copacetic Flourish. Then Terra Moon's Palladium. Then Terra Moon's Space Case. Then Copacetic Pile of Leaves. Then Sydney Gray's Queen of the North. Sydney Gray's Lemon Cream. Sydney Gray's Kiss Me, I'm Irish. Sydney Gray's Pecan Pie, Sydney Gray's Umbra, Copacetic Daffodil, Mom Professional Atomic, Copacetic Planetary Go, Looksy Snickerdoodle, and Copacetic Luca. Okay, and the last one, it didn't really tempt me. It's the new Mcgrath palette. I think we are all very disappointed when we saw it because, you know, we've been saying like, oh, everything you do is pink, and she's like, how about we make it more pink? So yeah, like I wasn't like blown away by it, but I also wasn't blown away by the last one, the Mothership. What is it? It's the one that the shades aren't baked, like special shades aren't baked. They're like normal, on the normal metallic pen. I forgot what's that Mothership. That one, like when I saw it, also looked very boring for it to me. And then I swatched it in store, and then I was torn, and then I got it, and it's like one of my favorite palettes. So I know that when I swatched those shades in store, I might, you know, I might get really tempted. So I decided to like kind of do my own spin on it. Like usually, right, the Motherships, like these 4 shades here are the special shades, and these here are more of like simple metallics. But I did everything sparkly, you know, like it's my palette, I can do what I want. And I like it. I like it a lot. I do think that the vibe is slightly different, but the tones, like at least for the mattes, I try to like stay within the idea, but mine is definitely like more textured, more vibrant, and I like it. I will use it and see how I feel about it. I'm sure I'm gonna love it because, you know, I pretty much put a lot of my favorite shimmers in here. But yeah, I'm just kind of happy with mine. Like for some reason mine doesn't look as boring. I feel like I just increased the saturation and the sparkle a bit. Which is really more of my alley anyway. So yeah, I'm happy with my dupe. And hopefully I won't be tempted because I do have all the Motherships, which I really didn't need to. Like I like 3 or 4 of them. So the first shade is Terra Moon Meteorite, followed by Sydney Grace, French Hands, then Mount Professional Warrior, Copacetic Cosmetics Conch, don't know how to say that, Mount Professional Femme Fatale, Sydney Grace Sweet Cakes, Terra Moon's Axis, Sydney Grace Tangerine, Terra Moon's Damus, and Mount Professional Island Serpent. This is it. Please let me know down below what has tempted you lately and what are you using instead. I think this is just like a great exercise to remind ourselves that most of us already have plenty. We don't need anything new, and we can just use what we have to get the same overall effect. Because in the end, eyeshadow is to be put on your eyes. It doesn't matter if it's in a certain format or another format. If you have a few palettes, you can probably also dupe other palettes, even if you have to like pull a shade from here and a shade from there. It's not as easily visible as having singles and putting them in a palette like this, but you don't have to have singles to do palettes. You can just have, you know, get the palettes you have and use one shade from one shade from the other, because in the end eyeshadow is about, like makeup in general, right? It's about putting it on your face. It's not about having it in a palette looking in a certain way. So yeah, I hope this was